Hello students, I hope you all are doing well. Welcome to the Analyst for 22nd of March 2024. So here we will be trying to understand the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now today is March 22nd and it is World Water Day, and that is why we will be looking at most important editorials from the Hindu regarding the World Water Day and the various issues regarding water in the world. In the next article, we'll be looking at Electoral Trust scheme, which is also in the news with reference to the electoral bond scheme. In the next one, we'll be looking at the nuclear energy finance, because recently the nuclear summit is going on in Brussels and the various financing models of nuclear projects is in the news. In the next one, we'll be looking at a recent study by Nature in which we have observed the phenomena of two stars which are known as twin stars, and these stars typically try to gobble up or say eat up various planets in their vicinity. And in the final one, we'll be concluding the article with a very novel initiative which has been taking place in the medical field. This is known as Xenotransplantation, or the transplantation of animal organs into human bodies. So students, starting with our very first topic, this is the World Water Day on March 22nd, and that is why we have two brilliant editorials in the Hindu. So we'll be looking individually at the editorials, but here we have seen that the World Water Day is a very important issue for our UPSC preparation, because we have to understand from prelims and also various papers of mains, we have the topics of water as a resource. So in prelims, we have to study that the various implications of water and the shortages with respect to the environmental ecology and biodiversity and also climate change. In GS1, we have a very important topic such as the distribution of key natural resources around the world, and let me tell you, water is also a very precious resource for us, and that is why it is also included in the GS1 syllabus. And also in the previous year questions, there are many questions regarding water and the various use and issues of water too. And finally, in GS3, where we have the environmental aspects of the syllabus here, especially with regards to conservation, environmental pollution and degradation. Now, the main context of the news is that, see, the 2024 edition of the United Nations World Water Development Report, which is by the name of Water for Peace and Prosperity, has been recently released. And this part itself is very important for your prelims. Why? Because in the prelims examination, they ask about reports and also the organizations who are releasing the reports. See, this report has been released in collaboration with the UN Water and the UNESCO, and even the author of this editorial, that is Tim Curtis, is also a representative of the UNESCO. Now here we will be discussing the ins and outs of this editorial, and with that we have to begin with the very basics. Now in the very beginning I told you that water is a resource for all. Imagine a single day without water, and there will be your answer that why water is a very important resource, right? Now here I will be giving you a very concise and brief breakdown of the distribution of the water resource across the world. See, you have seen the earth from the space, right? It is also known as the blue planet. Why? Because from the space, almost the 3/4 or say 1/3 of the earth is land, and the rest is entirely of water. And we can see the rest is entirely of water. That means most of the oceans, most of the water are actually contained in our oceans, and that is why 97% of our water distribution across the world is actually salt water, or the waters which are found in the seas and the oceans. Only around 2.5% of our water around the world is actually fresh water. And you know that human beings are also for fit animal consumption, we have to understand that we can only use the fresh water, and that is only 2.5%. And you have to understand also, between this 2.5%, if we magnify this part, we can understand the total fresh water. Out of the 2.5%, most of them are present in the glaciers and the permanent snow that we always see on the same mountains and Antarctica and the Arctic regions too. So most of the fresh water is actually locked away. That means we cannot use them for drinking purposes, right? These are locked away in the snowlands. And that next is actually the groundwater that we generally find. Out of this 2.5%, 30% is around groundwater. Then it is followed by ground ice and permafrost. Permafrost is generally found in the regions of Siberia, right? So this is also a very significant part, and the rest of the waters are actually consisting of 1.22% of the entire fresh water, and those types of water distribution is actually found in the lakes, in the soil, in the atmosphere, wetlands, rivers, and also in us also, plants and animals too, right? So we can understand actually the amount of water that we can use is what from firstly groundwater, then from the lakes, from the wetlands, from the rivers. So we find that actually the amount of fresh water is very less for us, and that is why we have to understand, with growing human population and with the various issues of climate change and various other issues, the water is a very pressing resource with huge demand but limited supply. And let me tell you, the issues that we find with respect to water is not a recent one. Even the civilizations once clashed between themselves. Particularly, if I can tell you, even the first peace treaty in the world with respect to history and present time can be found during the Mesopotamia civilizations, when the two big regions in the Mesopotamia civilization, that is the Lagash and the Umma regions, they actually fought between themselves, and the final result was a peace treaty, which is actually known as the world's first treaty, right, which was actually accorded a peace status, and the treaty is actually Treaty of Meselim. So for your essay purposes, ethics purposes, and also for the value addition in your mains answers, please do remember this point. Now we understood that even the empires, the civilizations, they fought for water, and now actually the times have changed, and also the issues and conflicts for water has also changed. Now we have to understand today that time is of extremities. Extremities of what? Extremities of climate change, changing weather patterns, and so on. Now the very first thing with respect to India, if we can find the issues regarding to water, is actually the very first is regarding the erratic monsoons. Now we find that monsoons generally arrive by the time of June, and it lasts till around say October, right, when the monsoons actually retreat back from the country. Now we find that the monsoons patterns are changing frequently. Sometimes we find that the monsoons have say arrived in the month of May, or sometimes it has been delayed for a couple of weeks and so on. So the patterns are very erratic, and let me tell you, monsoons are very important for our Indian agriculture, because more than 50% of the population reside in the rural areas, and most of the rural areas people, they actually have their livelihoods totally dependent on the agriculture. Now this is the rural part. Now if the monsoons are not regular, even the agricultural crops, they could not be grown properly. So finally the rural stress will also be flowing into the urban areas with reference to higher prices of commodities, food commodities, and so on. That is why we have seen one of the main reasons regarding food inflation is with respect to the erratic monsoons. Next, we also have seen increasing amount of change in the land use. That means that we are using more and more forest lands, clearing them, making way for agricultural fields. We are also developing the urban areas very rapidly. This is leading to unchecked amount of exploitation with reference to water resources, typically groundwater levels. And this leads me to the next point, that is groundwater table depletion, especially in states like say the western region and also southern region, typically also some regions over the North India, such as the states of Punjab, Haryana, western UP. These states are seeing increasing amount of groundwater depletion. Why? Because we find that the use of water in irrigation due to free water subsidies in these states are unlimited, and that is why the groundwater is actually depleting over these areas, leading to acute shortages of water, and also to the degradation of the quality of land. Totally, it's leading to infertility of the land too. Next, we find that the snow caps in the Himalayas, they are also melting over a period of time. Particularly if we talk about the snow line. The snow line, naturally the snow line means actually the point of the mountain or the point of the mountain peak on which we naturally find the snow. Recently, due to global warming and so on, we find that the snow line is actually going up. That means the the snow level, the glacial levels are depleting due to global warming. And this is leading to what? This is leading to the melting of ice, and this ice is being melted, flowing into the rivers and ultimately flowing into the oceans. So we find that a lot of fresh water is actually being melted and finally deposited in the oceans, ultimately becoming salt water. This is also taking place in the Arctic region, when it is it is being expected that by 2050 or by 2060 the entire Arctic region will be totally ice free due to global warming. This is also true in the case of Antarctica, when a large and large swathes of ice sheets and icebergs are breaking away from the greater ice sheets. So this is also a very, very important term. Next, also, the last but not the least, we have to find that the pollutant level in the waters right now is also increasing over a period of time, especially with respect to the amount of effluents which are released in the industrial operations, with reference to the household sewage operations, with respect to the amount of plastics which are polluting our Indian rivers and so on. So the pollutants level in the rivers, in the fresh water, drinkable water, is actually increasing over a period of time. And also the wastes from the agriculture, which is with respect to the overuse of fertilizers such as the nitrogenous fertilizers and so on, this is also leading to eutrophication in our local ponds, lakes and rivers too. So these are the various issues that we as a country and also over a community we are facing. And also, if we can find that these are some important data which is given to you, specifically I have curated this from the report that we talked of in the very context of the news. So within this report, these are some very important data for you all. Where you can use this data? Obviously in your mains answers, right? You can see that in the world 2.2 billion people are not able to have safe access to drinking water. Around 80% of the jobs around the entire world in developing countries are threatened. Why? Because most of the people there are actually dependent on the agricultural economy. If they are not getting water, how they will be carrying on their economic activities of agriculture, right? Next, we find that 72% of the freshwater withdrawals are used by the agriculture, and hence they are also facing this crisis. And also around $832 billion, note it is billion not million, billion dollars, right, are being the damage of worth this amount of dollars is being caused by the floods. Next, we find that 1.4 billion people are affected by droughts over a span of around 10 or 20 years. Also, we find that there is a 10% increase in the global migration patterns between this time period. And also, if we can see, this is the number of months per year, right, with severe water scarcity, or this means the ratio of water demand to the water availability. If this is more than 1, that means there is a severe water stress. And particularly you can see around the world, the western part of the countries and the continents are typically very, very water stressed. With reference to the African region and the Gulf countries, we can see that these are severely stressed with water. With respect to our own country, India, we can see the northern states of India, then the southern states of India, they are also facing water scarcity and water stress. So these are the things that we have to keep in mind for our mains examination. Now, see, the article is actually advocating for something which is known as better water diplomacy, right? Because water crisis, water stress now is no longer a regional issue. It is an international issue, so that the countries, they must be collaborating between themselves and be conserving water. They must be effectively framing some international water law. And those law and this kind of law, those kind of laws, they can have some things in between. Firstly, these laws must be enforcing peace, because many conflicts can arise due to water. As we have seen in the case of Mesopotamian civilization, the same case is happening right now, especially in African countries. African nations, many African nations, the East and West African nations, they are sometimes embroiled in crisis due to water shortages. Next, there must be an equitable allocation of water between the urban areas, rural areas, right? And also the various classes of the population, such as the higher income class, the lower income class. So there must be a proper standard for the same. Next, we have to understand the water And the relationship that the water has with climate, international stability is very, very close. That is why we have to also secure those access. Next, there are also indigenous tribals and local populations such as the tribal population sections. We have the vulnerable communities who depend on the water resources. Their traditional lives since centuries, they have been linked with these water resources such as lakes, ponds, sacred groves and so on. So we have to also protect their rights. And finally, we have to also involve the civil society organizations, or say the people like us, and also the academic researchers and so on, so that they also collaborate their knowledge to the conservation of water. Now, why this is important, why diplomacy with respect to water is important, it can be found out from this particular map. See, here we have the various aquifers or the various water bodies, river bodies and so on, the river basins in this particular region. We can find that this is the Indus river system, this is the Ganga river system or the drainage system, this is the entire Brahmaputra, and which is also flowing from the China, right, those kind of regions. So we can find there are various water bodies which are actually transboundary, or that means that these water basins, these river basins do not only have their localities within a particular country but share their boundaries across various countries. Now this can lead to potential issues, right? Also we have seen potential issues from China and how they're constructing dams on the various rivers which are flowing into India in the northeast region. So they are constructing dams and they are using dams for their own agricultural activities, but the Indian people, they are not getting the same due to overuse of water in the Chinese region only. Then also we have found that with reference to say Pakistan, we have a particular treaty, the Indus Water Treaty, right? But also that particular treaty is often in the news due to various issues that India has and also Pakistan has with the treaty. Also we find that only around 24 nations in the world, they have successful water treaties, right? And this is also a very, very serious thing. And that is why we have to find out that this water diplomacy is very, very important. Now, for the same, let us look at some of the important initiatives that the government of India has actually taken. Particularly, there are many government campaigns with very, very catchy terms, right? For example, per drop, more crop, gav ka pani, gav mein, khet ka pani, khet mein, har med per peer. So we have to understand these are very, very important eye-catching dialogues or say catchy lines which the government schemes actually from time to time speak of. So you can easily quote these in your mains answers, and we have to understand that with reference to water conservation schemes, we have Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sinchai Yojana, we have watershed management. Watershed management typically means how to manage a particular drainage pattern of a particular river. For example, say if you are talking about Ganga watershed management, we are trying to secure the flow, the natural flow of the river, the natural flow of the tributaries. We are trying to check the pollution levels in the particular water bodies and so on. So this is actually about the watershed management. Next, we are also talking about the Mission Amrit Sarovar and Jal Shakti Abhiyan. So these are the various government schemes that the government has taken with reference to water conservation in India. Next, there must be more local efforts such as land degradation neutrality. This means that whatever the land has been degraded due to overuse of fertilizer and so on, we must now be trying to conserve them. How? Typically by afforestation and planting local varieties of trees there, so that we can stop the amount of soil erosion and hence recharge the groundwater levels too. Next, we must be also trying to rejuvenate and recharging actually the various water bodies such as wells, tube wells, bore wells and so on, which is actually the farmers use for agricultural activities and so on. We find that the groundwater table is depleting. So how to recharge them? We can recharge them with various artificial and also natural way of recharging them by actually following a very, very sustainable amount of water usage. Next is obviously about watershed management uniformly across all the river basins in the country. Because we can also use technology, particularly with reference to micro irrigation and irrigation in the agriculture. We can link the irrigation say channels and the technologies with Internet of Things, right? This can essentially also use artificial intelligence, cloud computing and so on to effectively manage and monitor the discharge of water. Also, we can install the water meters on say the amount of water that is used in the agricultural fields, right? Finally, we can also leverage desalination, which is a process of converting the salt water into fresh water, particularly in coastal areas which also see a lot of amount of water shortages. Now, these were some of the initiatives. Now, your editorial also has a number of initiatives, as you can see, right? So this part will be there in the handout. Also, if you want, you can pause the video and read all the number of initiatives. Some of the important terms I already explained here. Other terms you can easily read and understand, right? So please do read this and use this, save this in your class notes, handouts, whatever you have, for the solutions with respect to water conservation. Moving on to the next topic, we find that the electoral bond scheme is in the news every day, and it has also been covered in the previous analyst sessions by me and also by other faculty members of the analyst too. Now you have some understanding of the electoral bonds, that it is a kind of a bond which is purchased by a particular person who is willing to donate to a particular political party. Now this was a scheme which was introduced almost say 5 to 6 years back, but there was a scheme which was existing from say 2012-13, which is by the name of Electoral Trust, and this is a very innovative way of also donating to political parties, and it is totally different from the electoral bond scheme. So do not think that these two are linked. These are totally two different ways of donating to the political parties. Now the electoral bond scheme is no longer an option, but please remember, electoral trust scheme is still a legal option in India for donating to the political parties. Now this, the context of the news is that recently there are some corporate bodies who did not ever donated to the political parties via electoral bonds. They only have donated via this electoral trust. And this is a very important topic with reference to Indian polity for prelims and for GS2, the Representation of People's Act. Now see, electoral trust generally means that there is a particular corporate entity, that corporate body, that can be a private company, right? That company has created a trust. We always hear about trusts, right? The various trust that we also hear of is Tata Foundation Trust, right? Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation and so on. They do what? They do various activities, but for doing those activities, they do what? They pull various donations from all the individuals in the society. So this electoral trust is actually pulling all the money in one particular private, say, trust to donate to various political parties. Now you can be a person who is, say, having a liking or inclination for a political party. Now you do not want to directly donate to them. You can donate to this trust in the name of the political party, and this trust will be then forwarding donations to the political party of your choice. So this is a way of donating money to your political party. Now this was introduced in 2013. This was notified by the Central Board of Direct Taxes. In India, it is known as the Electoral Trust Scheme. And here the companies have to be, these are actually based via the company, and they have to be registered under the Companies Act 1956. And here you can look at the various electoral trusts in India as of now. The Prudent Electoral Trust, which is actually the most subscribed trust in the country, and here the key benefactor is actually the multiple parties or the multiple stakeholders who want to donate to the political parties, right? Next, we have the various trusts, and also you can see that these are managed by the various private companies and so on. And here, these are set up by the companies. They pool the contributions from the people, from also the corporate sector, from anyone, and they distribute it later to the political parties of their choice. And these trusts have to renew their registration and license after every 3 particular financial years. So these are the various conditions that the country or say the government has actually outlined for the trusts. And they also face scrutiny under Income Tax Act of 1961 and also the Income Tax Rules of 1962. So these are various important things for your prelims and mains too. And here the various provisions we also have to look at. The contributions can be from any citizen of India. That means any foreigner cannot donate to the trust. Okay, so please do keep in mind. Next, any company who are registered in India, they can also contribute. Next, there are other kind of individuals such as Hindu undivided family, such as associations of persons or a body of individuals, and also people who are resident in India, right? They can actually donate to the political parties via this trust. Then how these donations will be distributed? So this, say for example, the trust got 100 rupees, for example, from the people. Now the trust can say keep 5 rupees, maximum of 5 rupees or 5% with itself for a particular period of time, and they have to give away a minimum of 95% to the political parties, right? That means whatever the money is actually donated to the trust, they have to give the maximum of 95%, right? The minimum of 95%, pardon, to the political parties. And actually these political parties cannot be any political parties. They have to be registered under the Representation of Peoples Act 1951. And here these trusts, right, which are maintained by the companies, they have to maintain details of various accounts or book of accounts, receipts, expenditures of the trust, and they will be audited also by a particular chartered accountant, and finally this will be also audited by the various tax departments of the country too. Next, the annual contributions and the various reports out of the same has to be prepared by the trust themselves, and they have to be submitted to the Election Commission of India too. Now here you can see how the various corporates actually in India donated via this election trust, right? And you can see the amount of the corporate members here. The names are not important. You can see how they are also using the trust way, not the electoral bond way. Also we can see amount of the various amount of electoral bonds and the comparison with the prudent electoral trust, right? That is a kind of an electoral trust that we also have seen in the previous slide. Now here we have to understand the main difference between the electoral bond scheme and the electoral trust. See, the very first thing is transparency. See here, for example, look at this particular diagram. See, this is this is from the ADR report of, say, a particular Satya Electoral Trust and the contributions to the political parties in this financial year. You can see they have to disclose the data, they have to disclose everything to the Election Commission of India, right? And also this kind of data is also available in the public, that this trust donated to what kind of political parties, in what amounts, and everything they have to be disclosed. But this is not the same with the electoral bond scheme. You know that electoral bond scheme was a particularly anonymous donation scheme, right? Next, also we see that the usage of this electoral bond and the usage of the electoral trust is also drastically different. The corporate people generally preferred electoral bonds because these were anonymous. And also we can see that from 2013 to 2022, 2023, this is the number of, or say the amount of donation from the electoral trust. And this is a total donation in just in a matter of, say, 2018 to present times via electoral bonds. If you can see, if you can calculate the total number, it won't be coming at least even as close to 11,000 crore which have been donated via the electoral bonds. So we see the contribution, or say the corporate entities or whoever donated, they prefer electoral bonds more than the electoral trust. And also you can see the amount of donations too. Amount of donations also were very, very high in the case of electoral bonds. Why? Because they were anonymous. And here the main aspect, the main conclusion that we have to draw here is that after the abolition or after, say, the uplifting of this electoral bond scheme, more corporates will have to be donating to the political parties via this, say, electoral trust. And this is also a very, very transparent way of contributing to political campaigns and funding too. In the next one, we'll be looking at nuclear energy finance, because recently we have to understand this is an urgent need of the entire world to reassess their nuclear financial policies. And we have to understand that we have to accommodating financing models, the various kind of financial models, the government financial model, the private financial model, or say an hybrid financial model for the various nuclear power plants in the country and also across the world. This is a very, very important topic with respect to prelims, in respect of general science, and also GS3 where we have infrastructure, and within that we have energy, right? Now here we already have discussed about say how nuclear energy is actually generated in the previous sessions of the Analyst 2. Now here we will be only concerned about the financial aspect of the same. Now you see, if we rank the world and the countries and the nations in respect of their nuclear reactors and the generation capacity of the nuclear reactors, we find that India is actually at a very not at a very higher level, right? India is, as of now, say, according to latest data, it is having around 23 reactors, and they are having capacity of around just 6.9 gigawatts, and that is actually very low in comparison to US, France, China, and so on. And here, the recent event that took place is actually, it took place at Belgium, which hosted the very first nuclear energy summit. This was in collaboration with IAEA's Atoms for Net Zero program. So this becomes a very, very important term for you for prelims specifically. And here, also we have to understand, when the world right now is trying to diversify into the cleaner, say, energy resources, the nuclear energy tops at at its priority level, because we have to understand that according to COP28 in Dubai, the main target in COP28 was actually tripling nuclear energy capacity by 2050, because nuclear energy has many reasons for its adoption, particularly because nuclear energy is 4 times less carbon dioxide intensive than the other renewable energy sources such as solar energy, wind energy, and so on. Now you may ask me that solar energy, wind energy, they're already renewable and they're already very, very clean. But we have to understand, not all solar energy, wind energy, and their generation and the way in which the energy is generated is carbon dioxide free. But here, nuclear energy is 4 times more carbon dioxide compliant, right? Next, the capacity to actually supply energy with respect to nuclear reactors is actually uninterrupted. That means they can supply electric energy, or say energy 24/7. That means the nuclear reaction, if it starts to give you energy for a long period of time, uninterrupted way. Next, also, barring the coastal waters or say earthquake sensitive areas, nuclear power plants can generally be constructed anywhere, right? And that is why they have very, very negligible geographical constraints of constructing the nuclear power plants. Next, once they have been built, once the nuclear reactors have been built, the costs to keep them operational is also very, very minimal, right? And also, the construction of the nuclear power plants, the various planning and construction is actually giving a lot of jobs to local people too. So employment factor is also factored in here. Next, it also requires a very limited amount of land as compared to the solar power parks, the wind parks, and so on. Even with respect to various hydroelectric dams, right? With reference to them, it requires a very smaller land when we compare to the other kind of energy generations. Next, they also have a longer life cycle because they need a minimal amount of maintenance and so on. Now here we have to understand how actually nuclear energy can be financed. Now, before looking into that, we have to see some of the potential of the growth of nuclear power plant and the energy in the world. Now see, we have around 400 nuclear reactors in the world. And we have to understand that these 400 nuclear reactors, they are contributing to around 1/4 of low carbon dioxide energy generation target of the entire world. Because right now, we are using too much of carbon dioxide intensive fossil fuels in say, coal generation done at the thermal power plants. Say we are also using natural gas and petroleum at various power plants. So we have to decrease that, and nuclear power plants is attributing to around 1/4 of that reduction. And also we have to understand that 170 of the power plants all around the world is actually in the planning and construction stage. So the amount of finance that they need will be obviously very, very high. Correct? Also, according to various recent developments in the nuclear technology, for example, the small modular reactors, these are the normal nuclear reactors only, but they are equipped with special technologies that actually reduces their size by a lot of margin, but they are not reducing the energy which has been generated, but actually it is making the nuclear reactors more efficient. Next, better technologies in terms of radiation proofing in existing plants, because there is this risk of radiation being spilled out to the entire neighborhood areas of the nuclear plant. So with respect to that, the technology nowadays has improved. Next, the fuel cycles of the use of uranium fuel is also right now been elongated, or the life cycle of the fuel is being elongated for more and more use of the same fuel in the reactors. So with respect to these technological developments, we find that the potential of nuclear energy will be very high going forward. With respect to this, there are many startups also who are actually looking into the nuclear field. Now this is a very non-traditional aspect, because nuclear energy so far has been mainly under the government regulation and control. Now if the startup, the private sectors, they can come in and they can also supply their technological expertise. This is an appreciated thing, and this is actually taking place mainly in the eastern, Western Europe, and also in the US too. Now, irrespective of all of this, there is this funding crunch in the world, particularly with reference to the multi-development and multilateral development institutions such as the World Bank and the various international financial developmental banks. Particularly the World Bank, for the last time they have actually given loan with respect to anything that was nuclear, was actually to Italy in 1959. Since then, the World Bank never even funded a single nuclear project. So this is a very worrying thing, that they have a developmental agenda. They want to reduce the carbon dioxide footprint of the entire world, but they are not even giving loans. The last loan that was given was in the 1950s. Next, many nuclear powerhouses, particularly in UK, particularly in the US, they are filing bankruptcy. That means the cost of building the nuclear reactors is actually very high, and they cannot maintain the cost, and that is why they are also shutting down the construction. This is a worrying thing. Why? Because they are not getting enough funding. Next, that is why we have to find a cooperative model of funding for the nuclear power plants. Particularly, we can learn from Finland, where from the 1970s they have a particular model of financing for the nuclear reactors, which is known as Mankala. Mankala is actually a kind of funding, private funding, where people like you, me, the corporate houses and various big enterprises, they will be giving money. They will be giving money to whom? They will be giving money to the other private individuals who will be constructing and say operating the nuclear powerhouses, right? So you will be investing in them, investing in the nuclear power plants. In return, you will be getting some, say, interest rates and say some of the returns, say various other kind of instruments of returns. But these private entities, they will be generating, they will be operating, they will be generating nuclear energy, they will be operating the plants, right? And they will be running the entire operations. So this is a very important model case study that you can also quote in your mains answers too. Now, what about India? See, when we talk about India, we only generate around 2% of our entire energy requirements using nuclear energy. Most of the thing which has been, most of the energy which has been generated in India is actually via thermal energy. And you can also see the amounts of the various energy use in India, right? Now here we can understand that there are many reasons for the low adoption of nuclear technology in India. Particularly, first is stigma. Stigma is what? Stigma is regarding the use of nuclear energy, because we have to understand nuclear energy since World War II is not seen in a very good way. Also by, say, the domestic policy makers, and also by the international policy makers. And also India, since its nuclear tests, they have faced various barriers with respect to the import of raw materials for nuclear reactors and so on. So this is a stigma that is existing all around the world right now. Next, there is also this weaponization risk that the advanced economies, or say developed countries such as the US and so on, they had this agenda against India, that India may be using its nuclear energy, right, for making nuclear weapons. But this has been, say, on the downway or on the downside since the signing of the India and US agreement with reference to nuclear energy. The agreement has been also signed with US, France and Japan so far, with reference to supply of nuclear raw materials in the country. Next, there is also this issues of radiation leaks and the various safety issues with the nuclear power plants. Then there is this also issue of this regulation, the regulation entity, the various regulation authorities in India, the various regulatory parameters in India. So these are the also various issues, because nuclear energy has by far, as you can see in this particular map, is only present in some regions of the country. It is not present in all regions of the country. So the small number of reactors in the country is also kind of a issue here. And particularly why? Because of very high cost of introducing these nuclear power plants in the country. Now, there are some good news with respect to this. The very first is actually the very first commercial nuclear power plant is actually at Tarapur. As you can see, Tarapur is located here, right? This is actually the first commercial nuclear power plant in the country, and this is actually generating energy at lower cost than even solar power, right? Next, the Kundankalam nuclear reactor, which is located here in Tamil Nadu, you can find here. This is actually very efficient, and it is generating power even lower at prices lower than done at the coal thermal power plants. Next, India has also an ambition of tripling its nuclear capacity at around 22,000 megawatts by 2031 and 32. This is a target that the Indian government has set. And finally, our own Prime Minister has recently also introduced and also visited various conferences where this prototype of fast breeder reactor were introduced. So this is a kind of fast breeder reactor which is trying to say utilize the nuclear power fuel very efficiently using state-of-the-art technologies. So with respect to this, the financing aspect of India nuclear power plant needs to be obviously enhanced, particularly via funding from the various multilateral institutions and also by the various domestic institutions too, such as banks and intermediaries and so on. In the next one, we'll be looking at a very interesting phenomenon. Now, this is actually from a recent study in the Nature, that is a journal in the scientific circles, which have found out that the twin stars actually they do what? They gobble up the planets surrounding them. Now, this is a very important aspect from your general science aspect of prelims. Now, here see that the stars, whatever stars that we have in our universe, they have actually formed via the condensation and say the coming together of the atomic and the various interstellar gas and dust, which is also known by the term nebulae, right? So these nebulae or the nebula, they come together and they coalesce under gravitational effects, and eventually over millions and millions of years after, a particular star is formed. Now, when from the same dust and cloud, right, from the same interstellar cloud, if two stars are being formed, they are known as twin stars. That means from this same star, from the same interstellar cloud, we are having two same stars, right? These are known as twin stars. And here, if for example this is one star and this is another star, right, if there are any planets who are say revolving any one of the stars, right, if there are any planets in between them, and if these planets are say influenced by some external factors, such as say for example this planet is influenced by more gravitational pull of this star, or say a nearby star, or say a nearby planet and so on, this planet can either go here or go here under the influence of gravity, right? So with reference to any external force on this planet, right, this planet can go to either the stars due to the extreme proximity between the two stars and the planet. And once the planet will be say falling into the other star, as you can see in this particular graphic, the planet will be totally submerging into the stars. And here the stars' chemical composition will be changing because the planets have their own unique components of iron, nickel and titanium, right? This same chemical composition will be merged into the stars, and this is exactly how this journal also found out this study. They actually studied the space and the various stars in the sky, and they looked into the chemical composition of the various stars. In some stars they found that the chemical composition of stars is actually containing the chemical composition of some planets too. So this means that these stars, right, are having have actually gobbled up or say eaten up the planet, right? And this can be only possible say when there is also another star in very close proximity with the other star, right? So this is how we can understand this particular event was observed, right? So it can take due to generally two reasons. First, influence of two stars as we have seen, and also due to orbital disturbance of the planet. As I told that if these planet was orbiting this star. So if there is any disturbance between them, then this thing would have been happened here. And in the final article, we'll be looking at xenotransplantation. The context is that the very first human transplantation of genetically modified pig kidney has been performed. Very, very important topic for general science here. Now see, this means that a particular organ, say it can be heart, kidney, liver or lungs, can be transplanted from the pigs to the human beings. Why? Because we can understand the human organs and the pig organs are approximately of the same size and also of the same shape of the human beings. So what we can do, we can genetically modify a particular pig, right? How? By modifying a certain aspect of their DNA. Here we have the gene as GGTA1 genes. So we can alter these genes, which is a pig DNA, right? We can alter the chromosomes and the genes here, and we can apply this or say multiply this in a tissue culture, and we can implant this tissue culture in a particular fertilized eggs of a particular pig, and the next generation of the pig will be having the genes which have been modified. Now this pig will be having the modified genes. And why did we modify them in the very first place? Because we have to make the organs compatible for the human beings. Sometimes the pig say organs may not be accepted by the human beings, so we have to modify that part. And also we have to make some diseases free from the say pig say areas, right? And that is why this particular gene is very, very important. We have to, when we are trying to modify genetically, we are actually making this gene inactive, right? So in this way we can modify the gene, and in this way a next generation of pigs will be bred and their organs can be used in human transplantation, right? And there are some challenges. Firstly, that the new organs can be say not accepted by the human beings, because the natural immune system of the human beings, they can totally reject the organ. Next, any disease which was existing in the pigs, they can have a risk of transmission to the human beings. And finally, there are ethical considerations too, because you are artificially shuffling everything in the pigs, right? And gearing a new breed of generation only for human purposes. That is not ethical for animal, and that can also lead to animal cruelty aspects too. So these are the various challenges also, but as of now we can see that this is a transplantation which has been taking place and also has the potential of saving human lives too. So this was all for today. I thank you all for being a very, very patient audience. I hope you all learned a lot from this session. So with this, all the best for your future endeavors, and do solve the test which is following up here right now. Thank you.